Our message is very, very simple. We want to educate the kids, not indoctrinate them.
I think this election should be the pandemic election.
Yeah!
She doesn't want these projects in her backyard, in Warringah. She wants them in yours.
What's wrong with Australia today?
For me, it's leadership. There's just a lack of leadership.
She wants them on your farmland.
I just want to ask, what have vaccine mandates achieved? Apart from putting good people out of work.
We should be energy independent here in Australia. We've got everything.
Have you confirmed that you are negative before attending tonight if you are unvaccinated?
You only have one vote, but it's very powerful.
Together, we will prevail.
How did that happen? How did we get muted? Hello, everyone. My name is Stephen Tripp. Welcome to Commanding the Narrative here with Paul Vallejo. Before we get to Paul, I just want to let everyone know about Buy Me a Coffee. If you want to head to Buy Me a Coffee, you can support us there. It's a good way of showing your love for us. So we would appreciate it if anyone wants to choose to throw in a couple of dollars. That would be great. We're also live streaming on YouTube, Rumble, and Facebook. You can comment on YouTube and Facebook, and at some point throughout the interview, I will be putting the link in the chat if anyone wants to call in. We haven't had too many callers lately, so don't be shy. We're happy to speak to anyone. But if you do just want to comment in the comments, that's a great way of contributing as well. But I have with me right now Paul Vallejo. Now, we've had him on quite a few times on the ex-candidates. We also did a Commanding the Narrative that wasn't released, which was fun. That's it. That may come out or not. But Paul, how you been anyway, mate?
Yeah, it's been what a time to be alive. I have to say, it's not boring. I'll give it that. That's for sure.
That's for sure. Yeah. There's a lot of things happening.
A lot of things happening.
So we've got you on today to talk about persuasion and epistemology.
Yes.
And that all comes down to a lot of the news and the political realm these days is driven by narrative.
Yes.
It's not so much driven by, a lot of people say it's driven by facts and the science.
And the news, as if the news was a thing.
Yes. Why is narrative so important?
Yeah, so I absolutely love the title of your show, Commanding the Narrative, because that's really actually what a lot of the game is about. We're living in a sea of propaganda and information and disinformation, and a lot of people think that they're in command of the information and other people have the disinformation.
Yes.
And a lot of people are also, are fooled. And the question is, well, how do we navigate this swamp? And we have groups of people living in different universes, different universes of ideas and facts. And so really, and in the news reporting on this a lot of times is reporting narrative and not news. So yeah, there's a lot to unpack there.
So how do we know we're on the right side of things?
That's one of the, I think that question itself is one of the best tells for knowing you're likely at least trying to be on the right side of things, because everyone thinks, they consume the information and the other people consume the disinformation. And someone's willingness to ask that question is one of the things that will separate you, because everyone has also confirmation bias. Everyone likes to be right. So one of the important issues is not embracing being right, but embracing learning and being open-minded, and that will help keep you out of an echo chamber.
And I always feel that people will believe what they want to believe, and they fall into these bubbles. So
definitely,
if you back in the day, if you used to listen to Alan Jones on 2GB, he was very well researched, but you knew that he had a leaning, a certain political bias. And if something came out bad about the Liberal Party, you would want to tune into Alan Jones so he would correct the argument and put an opposing argument that you may hear from another source. I'm sure it's the same on the other side. You have the ABC and the Guardian newspaper and the Project on Channel 10 and those sorts of platforms that I guess represent the other side. So a lot of people will just tune into those shows and they get one side of the view. And in America, it's even more polarized, it seems, with
Yes,
CNN and
definitely.
Fox News, and what you hear on one channel is completely different to what you hear on another channel.
That is another way that you know which side of that, whether you're being closed off from actual information, is the people who are telling you, don't look over there, that person's crazy, they're alt whatever, they're, the people telling you not to look at other information are usually the liars.
And that's where the left's so good, because they will hit you with you're an anti-vaxxer, or you are a racist, or you are a cooker, or you're a far right extremist, or whatever the tag they put you in. They put you in a box straight away, don't they?
Yep. That's definitely one of the tricks of maintaining the narrative, is telling you anyone not on our side of the narrative is some sort of heretic. And this has been true of I guess different holy books throughout the ages, is to think, well, if during the Spanish Inquisition, if you read a book by a Protestant scientist, you were a heretic, and that was commanding the narrative, Spanish Inquisition style.
Well, it's a good point that you brought up religion, because this is something that's been raging on for millennia.
Yes.
Whether you follow Islam or Judaism or Christianity or whatever it may be, it's always we have the word of God, and you need to follow this, and anyone else that believes differently is a heretic or an infidel or whatever it may be.
Yep. And in a single cultural society, you can perhaps get away with such orthodoxy. But in a multicultural society, the ability to peacefully disagree about different narratives and to accept that other people have different sources of information is absolutely critical to people living together.
Yeah.
So, when it comes to our modern versions of apostasy and calling other people heretics, this gets to the foundation of our ability to live together. And so, when it comes to trying to and that's where you have the things like the misinformation bill being so incredibly dangerous. It's our ability to live together requires us to be able to have our own opinions, think our own thoughts, and there is very much a drive to drive out information that is unhelpful to the narrative.
You know what's crazy? Whether you there's so many things, like there's two sides. There's the political side and the religious side. Okay, religion. You have the three real main religions of Christianity, Judaism and Islam. They're very similar.
Well, I mean, they're all the Abrahamic gods. So it's kind of an interesting thing. A lot of people don't think about it, but they do worship the God of Abraham, all of them. And so in Islam, Jesus was a prophet, just not the last prophet. In Judaism, Jesus they consider him a holy man, but not the Son of God.
They consider him a prophet, I think, but not the Son of God.
Not the Son of God. And then there are offshoots of Islam. One is the Baha'i faith that considers Muhammad as not the last prophet, and that makes them heretics among Islam. And actually, Sydney has one of the few world's Baha'i temples. I think there are 3 or 5 in the world, and that's an offshoot of Islam.
Yeah, and on the political side, you have the Greens and maybe a party like One Nation, who you would think are complete opposites. But if you head onto their website and compare their policies, they're actually very, very similar.
That's a heretical thing for you to say, Stephen.
Well, the only difference is just there might be slight differences on how to get there. So, for example, One Nation will say, let's bring back manufacturing, but we need to do that by having cheap, reliable energy, so coal and oil and the gas. The Greens will say, let's bring back manufacturing, but let's do it with renewable energy. So there's a bit of a difference, but it's very similar. So if you got a Greens person and a One Nation person in a room, they would both agree, let's bring back manufacturing.
And they will find some way then to demonize the other. Which very much seems to that's the popular thing to do these days, and that is the divisiveness of trying to maintain the narrative, particularly by making the other people seem crazy. Is one of the things we sort of need to get away from: the freedom to agree to disagree and to find common cause. I mean, that's I think there's probably a larger agenda that's driving us towards division, which is the primary goal of perhaps one hypothesis, at least, of people pulling the strings, is, they have to make sure that there's division between.
Divide and conquer.
Yes. Right.
We've got a comment from Graham. Hello, Graham. It's good to see you commenting as always. I learned long ago not to focus on who is speaking. I prefer to listen to what is being said and what evidence is being presented. Very intelligent comment there from Graham. That's very important. To try to depersonalize it, to look at the idea. But let's get into why I love the title of the podcast so much: Commanding the Narrative. What is a narrative? How do you control it? Why is it being controlled? What are what's the important interest of controlling that narrative? If you don't mind pulling up one of the slides that we talked about earlier. Yep. So at all costs, maintain the narrative. This is the powers that be, shall we say, make sure that any scientist that is off script gets labeled and deplatformed and defunded. A skeptical media is also has to be demonized, and that's happening a great deal these days. And inconvenient data also has to be shunted aside. So, and part of that effort is now being put through in legislation in the misinformation bill. And it's as dangerous as it gets, because, the ability to think, freely. What that basically means is that, if you're deciding what's misinformation, you are controlling what people get, which means the only thing you will get is government narrative. This is going to be a little bit off topic, and I know we're going down the narrative path, but I just want to ask you firstly, I've seen you speak at different events at different groups and things, and you've spoken to people about this, and I've seen you evolve your way of thinking as you've gone along, and you've expanded on your knowledge of epistemology and all those things. Why did you go down this path originally? What sparked you to say, hang on, I need to know a little bit more about this? Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, the nature of, I grew up Catholic, and, part of my history, but also, I've always had a love of science, and, the history of Catholicism and science didn't really get along for a number of centuries. I think it took just to the last few decades where they apologized to Galileo for throwing him in prison for saying that the Earth wasn't the center of the universe. Yes. And so these questions of all these things have been interests of mine: philosophy, science, and why people believe what they believe. And I guess it then just became a great deal more. That's a decade's set of journeys in trying to figure things out. But it all became much more topical over the last years and couple decades, where it became clear that believing certain things was heresy in modern society. And that trend seems to be accelerating, and it's deeply disturbing for what I would consider myself a free thinker, but it's not just about me. It's the ability for people to live alongside each other. Back 20 years ago, it was okay to be in different political parties in the US, and now people are excommunicating each other's family members for different political parties, for different political views, and also for not taking something that someone says is safe and effective, and the other one saying, well, based on what long-term testing. It's so sad, isn't it? Yeah, and I don't, it's a hypothesis, that I don't think it's an accident. I'd love to be wrong about that. I'd love to think it's some random effect, but that's, I think, part of the reasons why I'm quite passionate about fighting against the taking control of the narrative by powerful forces, is because I think it doesn't lead to anywhere good. I think the problem is there's certainly different personality types amongst humans. Definitely. If you look at numerology or astrology or the Enneagram or the Myers-Briggs test, generally there's usually 9 different types of personality traits. There may be 12, depending on which you follow. So it seems that maybe the powers that be or people of influence manipulate that. They know that certain people will be more, facts orientated.
Yep.
Some people will be more emotional, emotionally driven. Some people may not have a focus on statistics and that sort of thing. Their focus might be elsewhere. So there are distinctive personality traits that are different between human to human. So they can be exploited.
Yeah. Well, actually, why don't we just jump straight in from that to epistemology and persuasion?
Let's do it.
Okay. So, one of the things that people really need to try to figure out, and a lot of people do, is ask the question of how do we know what we know? Because we are living in a sea of various forms of information and disinformation, as we talked about earlier. And one of the earliest people that questioned that was actually a very religious man, Rene Descartes, who thought, well, in all my things that I think I believe, all the things that I see or things I've heard, I might be controlled by a powerful demon to actually make me think certain things and make me believe certain things. So is there anything at all I can be sure of? And his answer to that was, well, cogito ergo sum, which translates to, I think, therefore I am.
Yeah.
And he thought to himself, well, even if I'm deceived in all things, I can at least be sure that I exist.
Yes.
Because I'm thinking about this, therefore I have to exist. Everything else is up for debate.
Yes.
And so,
so essentially, if you're looking out at the sky and you say, well, that's blue, how do you really know it's blue? As you said, you could be possessed by a demon. It could be a rainbow color or something like that. But how do you know?
We could be plugged into the matrix.
But if you're
I might not be here.
That's right.
You might not be here.
Exactly. But if you're in a dark room with your eyes closed and you're thinking, you know that you exist,
right?
And you have the power of thought,
right? Yeah. If you think anything at all, you have to exist.
Yep.
Now, in every other fashion, we might be being deceived by something. It could be by being in the matrix. It could be by ABC News.
Yeah.
It could be, and one of the things. So then the question is, okay, if we're going to be really careful about, how we, what we think and what we believe, then going through the process of being skeptical about, because this is another tendency of people, is people seem to want to believe. There's confirmation bias. That's one of the things that makes the term climate change so powerful, is because once you put that in someone's head, anytime the weather changes, it's like, that feels like climate change.
Yes.
And there's been no time in history where one decade has been the same as the last decade. Over the course of hundreds of years, there have been all kinds of climate cycles, and now
there's another manipulation there that you've sparked in my mind. It's called the reticular activating system. Now, if you're looking to buy a new car and someone says, well, you should get a Mercedes. Now you're driving along,
yes.
you're spotting Mercedes everywhere.
Right.
Oh, there's
That's
one,
right.
there's one there,
That's
and you wouldn't have noticed them any time before. But now all of a sudden you're noticing them.
Yep.
Someone might say, "Oh, you need to check out this new cereal at the shops." Well, now you walk into Coles, you're seeing the cereal, straight away, where you probably wouldn't have noticed it before. If someone's telling you the climate is changing, every little thing that comes along, you're going to be like, "Oh,
that's right, exactly."
Yep.
And that is the power of confirmation bias, which is why one of the things I try to think of to combat that is to always be on guard for confirmation bias. And does that really mean what I think it means? But you're absolutely right. I remember being in this one debate about this, I think it was about a year ago, where it was a particularly warm spring day, and people were saying, this is evidence of climate change. But like a week before that, they were talking about it was a record number of days under a certain temperature for 2 months. So it's like, okay, so you ignored that, and now that we're having a hot week, that's evidence of what you want to believe.
They're taking it a step further now. Now they're using predictions. It's always like, it's going to be the hottest summer on record. It's going to be dry, and we're not going to get any rain. And then the opposite happens.
Right.
But it's already in someone's head. Oh, it's going to be a 40-degree tomorrow. It's going to break all the records. But it ends up being 35 or 33 or something like that. It doesn't even get near to 40, but people, it's still in people's heads. And they will say, wasn't it the hottest summer on record?
Right.
I heard that somewhere, blah, blah, blah.
So there's a few different things that I think come at play that's very persuasive to people. One is confirmation bias, making use of that that issue of confirmation bias. Another one is people's desire to be on the right side of the tribe. Being tribal people, it's very ingrained in us that if you get ostracized, you're on your own in the wilderness, you're in a bad way, right? And so if you want to be on the good people side, then you have to believe what good people believe. It's the modern version of excommunication. Excommunication back in the days of being a Catholic meant the end of your life. And you had no community, you had no support, no one would talk to you. And those things are sort of being weaponized in a modern secular society by calling someone a climate change denier or an anti-vaxxer.
Yes, well, we saw that during COVID, didn't we?
Yep.
95% of people getting vaccinated. If you're only one of the few that's not getting vaccinated, you're gonna, but you were made to feel isolated. Definitely. You're made to feel like there was no one else out there that was going to defend you, stick up for you, stand up for you. Yep. You're isolated. You're on your own. Yep. You're bizarre. You're strange. You're a cook or an anti-vaxxer. So you have to be part of the group. You have to, and if you are part of the group, you're a good person. Mm-hmm. You're doing what's right. You're taking one for the team, or whatever it might be. Whatever the narrative is, they want you to feel isolated. They want you to feel alone. They want you to feel strange if you take a different path.
Right. And those are fundamentally, they're accessing that for survival instinct for being part of the group.
Yes.
Along with confirmation bias, which made it very powerful, and also finding a way to hijack one of the main ways that people persuade each other. So can we pull up the ethos, pathos, the rules of rhetoric?
Yes.
I got to thank my friend Martin Jenkins for bringing this one up. When he was a debater, and he pointed out that the primary ways that we've tried to persuade other people are pathos, logos, and ethos. Now, so primarily there's emotion. So in terms of when you're being persuaded, because it's always very useful to know how are you being manipulated. And everyone manipulates each other all the time, but a lot of times we manipulate our friends for good things. It's like, hey, maybe we can eat a bit healthier. All right, do you want to go out and have a good, swim or paddle or something like that? Yep. Right. But everything is manipulation. The question is, who's manipulating you and why? And so, in the case of what we've been talking about, a lot of times that emotional manipulation of, if you're a good person, so there was plenty of emotional manipulation when it came to the COVID narrative and also the climate narrative. Don't you care about your children? But then there's logos and ethos. Now, logos is logic, right? And ethos is mostly about credibility. And that's one of the important things is we always are looking for a credible source. Everything we know, most of everything we know is because we have listened to a source we deem credible. History. Do you know that the Peloponnesian War happened or the American Civil War? I wasn't there.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but we find a credible source and we believe that. There's no reason to think that didn't happen. But that's one of the strange things about that maybe rang alarm bells is that it's been clear to me in the last few years that credible sources I thought were credible have been hijacked. And someone who is a lover of science, one of the science degrees I have is in economics. And in economics, they teach regulatory capture, right? The idea is that, if you are in an industry, you have a couple of ways to make a profit. You can create a really good product, sell it well, market it well, or you can capture the government and have the government buy your product or make, the ability to, and also the government regulator has a government salary, typical middle class salary often, but the industry, a vast industry, can more cheaply create a revolving door for the regulators so that the regulators know if they play ball, they get a cushy office job, once they leave. And then, the cheapest way for that company to succeed a lot of times is to capture the regulator. And so, this concept that our climate science or our pharmaceutical science is actually public service is narrative nonsense. And And now the question of, how do I know that? I mean, in some cases it's an easy claim to make. I mean, pretty much everyone thinks that the military-industrial complex, works with the media to lie us into wars. I mean, that's fairly widely accepted.
Yep.
The smoking industry, widely accepted that was regulatory capture.
Yep.
Now climate, the pharmaceutical industry. I mean, a lot of people, and this is one of the strange things, is I've met plenty of people who were skeptical about the pharmaceutical industry on a number. Oh no, I don't like to take medication because I want holistic health, and also don't trust big government when it comes to the military and I don't trust what they say about that. But when the government and the military get together and offer me something safe and effective, sign me up. Like, somehow that happened.
I think that's because vaccines were always a little bit separated from the pharmaceutical industry, even though they were produced by the pharmaceutical industry. It was always, you were giving this to your kids, and obviously everyone copped it when they were kids, and they survived, and they didn't really notice any side effects or anything like that. So it was always ingrained in us that vaccines were safe, vaccines were effective. The problem was, what they gave people during COVID weren't traditional vaccines.
There's a couple of different things. As I've questioned more narratives over the last couple of years, the vaccine safety narrative, let's just say, even though I don't think that the old vaccines are nearly as dangerous as the mRNA ones, shall we say?
Yeah.
I think that there was a maintaining the narrative on that as well, which would probably be a subject for a different podcast for one of the guests that we've been talking about. So maybe we should get into how I came to determine that we were being fed a false narrative during the COVID epidemic. Can we pull up? Are we really following?
Well, I just want to quickly just touch on this, the ethos, pathos, and logos.
The hijacking of credibility in ethos is a big one. But go ahead.
But I think I know from the Myers-Briggs test, the different personality types, you would think that they're all equally divided, but they're not. Some are very, very rare. Like they maybe 5% of the population is a certain, I know my one. I think it's very, I'm a true seeker and blah 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 blah. I'm assuming a lot of people are emotionally driven.
True.
So I saw a debate recently. It was with a Greens upper house member of the New South Wales Parliament, and she was debating against nuclear energy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, she was trying to obviously win that debate, and she was losing because the audience that she was with were very right-leaning. So good on her for getting in there and being present, because a lot of Greens won't do that. But once she started losing the argument, she went straight away to, well, I have grandchildren and I need to save them.
Right.
Okay. Even though we all knew that her argument had fallen over, she went straight to the emotion, and she wasn't able to persuade that group because I don't think there was much emotion in that group. But maybe people listening elsewhere would tap into that. Oh, I want to save my grandchildren too, or I want to save my kids. So it's a very powerful method that it's almost like they're trained in that way.
When the facts are with you, you stick with the facts. When the facts are against you, you turn the other, you attack a different path. And she was, I guess, using the only path left before her. Actually, there's a really funny video by Bill Burr Bill Burr on him arguing with his wife. I don't recommend you pull up that quick clip on this podcast, but it was hysterical. It's you can Google it as the Champagne of Victory speech.
Okay.
But yeah, we'll another time.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, when it comes to the hijacking of credibility, which has been, this is one of the things is that there are a lot, because I've really tried to figure out, I guess it's important to back up and show my work as to why I believe what I believe in terms we were fed a false narrative when it came to the COVID era.
Yep.
There's the earliest one was, of course, the lab leak hypothesis.
Yep.
The Nature paper saying that there's no way it was other than a zoonotic thing, and that the reasons of that were it's a whole chain of reasoning. It's a bit more complicated, but when I watched the hydroxychloroquine trials, that's when I knew something was very seriously wrong, because it was in your face obvious that they were trying to spin a false narrative.
Yep.
So, here's one of those things. I'm not a medical doctor. Even though I've got a few science degrees, medicine is not one of my fields. But you don't have to, and that's one of those things. They hijack credibility. It's like, what gives you the right to talk about this? You're not a doctor. You're not a climate scientist. It's like, okay, yeah, but I know how to test a hypothesis.
You know the scientific method.
Yeah. And if you're going to say you tested something, and then you create test conditions that make it obvious before you even do anything that you're not testing the hypothesis, I either know you're incompetent or you're corrupt. And that's where, I wrote this article. The idea here is that the hydroxychloroquine tests, the first one, well, initially there was the hypothesis by the French doctor, Dr. Didier, his French, I don't know how to pronounce his name, Raoult, and also Dr. Zeb Zelenko talked about treating COVID with hydroxychloroquine and zinc. There's a paper from, I think it's 2016, that hydroxychloroquine is a zinc ionophore, helps channel zinc into the cells, so it would be an effective antiviral. The first test on hydroxychloroquine, then, when they ran it, and you can go down to, so this is the beginning part of this is, how would you, if you wanted to test the hypothesis of a drug used early to treat patients as an antiviral, how would you test it? And tell me your testing protocol. You, of course, would test it at the right dose and give it early, because an antiviral, you have to give it early. If you're treating like a collateral bacterial pneumonia, you do it late. So you give it early and at the right dose. Well, and we scroll down, we see what happened with the first test. So that's the one, the World Health Organization Solidarity Trial. Okay, so what they did was they gave it at a 6 times dose to hospitalized patients. So when I saw that, I was like, okay, if you ever had to take Tamiflu, which is an antiviral against the flu, it tells you on the package you have to take it within the first 48 hours to be effective.
Yes.
Right? Antivirals have to be given early. And so the idea of testing it on hospitalized patients, and people don't roll into the hospital until typically is days 6 through 10, is absolutely absurd. It's past the antiviral window. So, right then, just on the when you're testing it fails miserably.
So you've got here, instead of 400 milligrams a day for 5 days, they gave 2,400 milligrams a day on day one, and 800 a day per day for 10 days, and they gave it late and without zinc.
Correct. So I mean, you couldn't fail more hard than that in terms of testing the hypothesis. Now, one of the things about that is, I mean, they killed people in order to propagandize against hydroxychloroquine, because if you give someone 6 times with Tylenol, which you call here paracetamol, right? If you gave that 6 times the maximum dose, you would have liver failure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, when you do that with hydroxychloroquine, fortunately, it doesn't kill people at it's not quite as easy to overdose with hydroxychloroquine.
But dosage is extremely important.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a phrase, I forget who said is, there's no such thing as a poison, just a poisonous dose.
Yes.
I can kill you with too much water.
Yes.
Right. Throws off your electrolyte balance.
Yep.
Almost everything has a poisonous dose.
Yep.
And so when it comes to hydroxychloroquine, to give people 6 times on day one, the maximum,
so when you say day one, that's the first day of the treatment. It
doesn't
doesn't mean you've had COVID day one.
No. Right. Exactly. Yep. So the first day you give the medication, you're giving 6 times the dose that was recommended by the people who are saying, I've been treating people effectively with hydroxychloroquine at 400 milligrams a day. And then they went off and they gave it at 2,400 milligrams.
Okay.
So now, so here's one of those things where when I saw most people looked at the test headline, which says it doesn't work and it causes side effects. Like, Oh, really? So if you give something at the wrong time and it doesn't work, and you gave it at 6 times the dose and it causes side effects, you think that's news? You really need to spend millions of dollars to test it that way? Well, why would anyone test anything like that?
See, this is how they hide stuff. We were talking to Victor DL on the X Candace a couple of weeks ago, and I might bring up a clip of him later because he's got a very interesting story. But he was a researcher at a university for professors, and he said a lot of these professors, they don't write their own papers. They get researchers to write their own papers, and then they'll read the summary, and then there's a summary of the summary that just usually a paragraph. So there's all these pages and pages of study, but really what only gets out there is the summary. So there's all this hidden stuff in there.
That's it.
And you think this professor knows it all and is abreast of everything that's going on, but it's not really the case.
The doctors as well. So I was in Mexico and I asked, the doctor in Mexico what he thought about hydroxychloroquine. He said, they tested it and it didn't work and caused side effects. It's like, which study are you basing it on? Well, either the solidarity trial or the recovery trial.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so you obviously didn't read the test methods. I mean, most people are time poor.
Yes.
And we count on experts to have deep knowledge of the subject so that we don't have to read the test protocol and look up the normal dosage for what we count on the science or the doctors to have done that for us.
Well, they do the same thing in politics. I'll give a politician 3,000 pages of a legislation or a bill to go to a vote, and they'll say we're voting on this, tomorrow or in the next few days. How the hell are they going to get through that? Even with staffers, you're not going to get through that.
And it's not a bug; it's a feature. And this is one of those things where, like for instance, if we can go back through this article again. So there's the test itself. And then there was how it was reported on, because you'd figure if someone tested something that badly, you can scroll down. If someone, that's good right there. If someone tested something that badly, you'd figure a good news media would say, okay, solidarity trial, you guys are morons. You should, turn in your science card.
But who in the media is going to know that?
Well, I mean, you'd think that a journalist, because look, I read the study protocol and I realized that there was a problem with it. Someone in the media has a responsibility to actually, if they're reporting on this study, and it's a major study, would actually look at the test protocol and say, you guys are nuts.
So how many people in the media are scientists? Like you can see it because it's almost like reading the Matrix.
You don't have to even be a scientist. You just know that you can't test something at 400 milligrams and 6 times it and you should know something is wrong.
Okay.
Or interview and that's one of the things, is that one of the people who pointed this out was Dr. Chris Martinson, who we got a chance to interview. Yep. And he was pointing out, hey, everyone, you can't test early treatment late and at the wrong dose. And no one in the media was interested, which is how you know that you're being fed a curated narrative. That's how you know you're being fed misinformation, is when the people trying to point out something absolutely obvious in the test protocol, zip, no one in the mainstream media said a word.
Now,
other than this bullshit, which is on
the. Now, I've heard you speak about this.
You can keep that up because there's one more. But do you want?
Okay, you finish off. Yeah.
Okay, so then the next one was the Together trial, again. So that was the recovery trial. Yeah. Harambe says give the correct dose because they gave a dose fit for a gorilla. At 6 times the.
Yep.
And then the next trial was the Together trial, where they also overdosed people to hospitalized patients. And, they put in propagandistic terms. Biggest study in the Trump-backed anti-malarial drug is ended with immediate effect after it made no difference. Oh, really? You give something at the wrong dose in the wrong time and it made no difference.
Yeah.
And then you throw in like evil associations.
Yes.
It's too like what
people that are against Trump are going
to. Yeah. So it's like, alt-right cooker media, racist drug fails, you might as well just throw in more propaganda into. So that was the Together trial.
Yep.
And then you go down, and then when the last trial, so the recovery trial and the solidarity trial. And then the last article that came out in the Lancet. Lancet's one of the most important scientific journals in the world, published this Surgisphere study, which was it was hundreds of hospitals, absolutely damning data that hydroxychloroquine didn't work. I mean, it was a lot of data that all basically had a very hard conclusion. Turns out it was 100% made up bullshit. And it was retracted. So it came out to really splashy headlines of, oh yeah, this is the nail in the coffin, right? And then when the study was retracted because it was found to be completely fabricated, the retraction made no news. Okay, again, commanding the narrative.
Yes.
You know, if and this happens a lot. There's a splashy event. You know, sources say Steve Tripp found XXYYZ.
But we
right?
take it back to the weather. Oh, it's going to be the hottest day on record tomorrow. But there's no, they don't cover it on the news the next day. Oh well, it wasn't really.
Right.
I mean,
That's right.
It was
Exactly.
7 degrees.
Exactly. And this is how you know when you're being lied to, and the difference between the people who, you know, you have to look for the retraction. You have to look for where you're being lied to. But if being in your comforting community, all believing the same lie, and that's the good people club, you know, you don't want to look for disconfirmation of your.
Well,
your
it's like
bias.
those people who might have an allegation against them, and everyone believes it. It goes out in the media. It's spread out everywhere, and they have to spend years trying to clear their name, and they go through the courts, and they finally clear their name. They were innocent all along. Yeah, that doesn't correct the narrative, does it?
What's the phrase? The lie makes it around the world before the truth gets on its train.
A lie makes it halfway around the world before the truth gets its pants on.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
So I've heard you discuss this before, specifically this study. And you've explained how you can use this to approach people that know the scientific method, start to speak their language.
Yes.
I mean, it's all about credible sources, right?
That's right. Because the thing is that, you know, the people in we can call it some people call it the managerial class, other people call it the elite class, other people call it the scientific community. You know, they rely on journals. It's like, okay, well, you know, are you credentialed? Are you an epidemiologist? You know, what school did you go to? You know, because the people writing these bullcrap studies all are super highly credentialed and writing obvious bullcrap, right? And so the people who think they're smart, who have read the highlight, that they read it in a journal, they believe it because they think they have the credible sources, and that's where they're you know, turn down the nose at anyone who doesn't have their views comes from. It's like, okay, well, you know, you don't have the degrees nor the journal credibility to say anything else. So how could you possibly convince me? It's like, well, you know, okay, if you get a chance to say, okay, well, do you think you can test early treatment late and at the wrong dose and test the hypothesis? You know, and you can kind of walk them through that. That was the point of me writing this article, is like, okay, so even someone who doesn't want to believe any of this, tell me how you can take this study and convince me that it wasn't 100%.
So what you're saying, instead of going to them first and saying, oh, these studies, you know, they tested at the wrong dose and they tested high, then blah, 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 and hitting them with all the information first, take it slowly.
Yes.
Walk them through it.
Yes.
Ask them a simple question.
Yeah. Because emotion won't work on these people. Even though they do work on emotion, they don't realize it. They go to their credible sources. They think they're standing on hundreds of years of the most high quality journals and the Ivy League institutions. And so then, you know, just the only path forward then is to slowly walk them through the logic. So
they've been taught the scientific method.
Right.
They trust the scientific method.
Right.
They feel superior because they understand and trust.
And they have the credentials.
And
they've been through. They got the cap, you know, with the dangly bits on it.
Yeah. Yep.
All that
That's
stuff.
right. Yeah. They got that photo. They got their certificate on the wall and all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
So you hit them with the question, you know, would.
Yeah, basically, can you help me? You know, because one of the things, you know, you're a scientist. You know, we all, you know, let's talk about testing a hypothesis. You know, if you were given Tamiflu, which is an antiviral, right? So we know that you have to hit it early. And if I gave you that to you, you know, after you had the disease for a week, and it didn't work, you know, what would you think of that? You know, it's like, oh, well, it would be dumb because you have to take an antiviral early. Oh, okay. All right. And what if I gave it to you, you know, I just give you a giant pile of it for you to shove in your mouth and you got sick. And I was like, I think that drug is toxic. You know, what would you think? Oh, well, only an idiot would do that. Right. Okay. You know, so let's talk about the Together trial or the recovery trial, you know, so basically try to make it because the brain is looking for an excuse to dismiss. It's looking an excuse to turn off. I want to get away from this situation with my pre-existing beliefs because that's what makes me the most comfortable, right? And so, and a lot of times, and sometimes I've had some success, and other times you get the cognitive dissonance moment where it's kind of like you get the emotional reaction
because it's painful.
Because it is. Yes,
it's
right. I'm part of this elite class with the good people, with all these other good people who are standing head and shoulders above the deplorables, and we're making fun of all these flat Earth people. And that's the way I like it.
Yeah, that's right. And if they have to question what they've believed in, all throughout their career, and some of these people may have careers that are decades long and university time and training, and they haven't picked up on this, and they've missed this.
And they could be doctors who are they like their status in society as the givers of information, the healers of information. They're respected, not as much as they were a few years ago, by some subset of the population who I think have very good reason to question their critical thinking.
Especially if there's members of the public that are going along patting them on the back as well and saying,
absolutely,
thank you for saving us.
Yes,
and
that's right.
All that sort of thing.
Yep.
So what I might do now is we interviewed, as I said, Victor DL the other night on the Ex-Candidates, and I encourage everyone to firstly watch that interview, but also follow his podcasting channel, because he's interviewed a lot of scientists that are associated with the Australians for Science and Freedom, like Gigi Foster and Jason Strecker, and a lot of people, a lot of professors and academics that were able to see through this and really study exactly what you did. Actually look at the study, go through it with a fine-tooth comb, and do their own cost-benefit analysis and analyzing the data and all that sort of thing, and then gone, hang on, something's wrong
those
here.
People went after hard. You see, that's another way you know that you're kind of on the right side of it, is that if they were wrong, then people could just point out that they were wrong.
Yes.
But they were went after in all kinds of very coercive ways. So, whether it be the whole canceled from university, or that's the danger of the misinformation bill, is that the scientists who are off the narrative, who are trying to warn the public about something that's happening, that like, oh yeah, we're giving an early treatment at the late at the wrong dose. If the misinformation bill passes, well, the misinformation bill is about the credible source, which is the government source. Was it Jacinda Ardern said, you should look at us as the only source of your information. Yeah. Well, if that's codified in law, and you're being, forced out of your job to take something that Jacinda says is safe and effective,
so dangerous.
It is incredibly dangerous.
So dangerous.
The open debate, the open forum. I mean, and that's it's a complete.
You're going back
inversion of science.
You're going back to Galileo days.
Yes, that's right. You? We're back to that. That's right.
Yeah.
The Earth is the center of the universe. If you say otherwise, we're going to burn you like Giordano Bruno. Burn you at the stake.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we'll just play this clip quickly. It might be a little bit of a lengthy clip, but I think it's important because it talks about I'll let Victor say it in his own words.
Pro-vaccine. I used to be a New York Times subscriber, a Sydney Morning Herald subscriber, Guardian subscriber. So this was quite the leap for me to even notice that. But what I did do after that, and believe it or not, it made me sick to the stomach, is I started to do research. And at that point in time, doing your own research was like the worst thing in the world. And I came across Joe Rogan. This is probably going to make you laugh as well. The idea that I had of Joe Rogan was that he was a far-right extremist, because that is what I'd been told by the corporate media. And I found his podcast with Robert Malone. And wow. I went for a walk, and I normally go for a walk for 90 minutes. I'm very high energy and I need to constantly get my energy out. I listened to the whole thing. I went for a walk, the same walk again. I did a loop, and because I wanted to listen to it a second time. And then I listened to Joe Rogan's interview with Peter McCullough. Mm-hmm. Yep. And then I listened to those two podcasts the rest of that afternoon and evening, probably 3 or 4 times. And it was equal measures. All of a sudden, all of those doubts in my head, I felt like I was being understood. I felt like I wasn't crazy anymore. But also it was a little bit upsetting because there's a lot of realization that, man, there's a lot of lies. I've been lied to. Everything I've been told is wrong. But then that set me down the path, down a very different rabbit hole from the rabbit hole that I was used to going down, like from an academic background or even from my own usual background search on the news sites. I went down a very different one. And I'm really glad that I did.
And he goes on to talk about how, because I asked him this, I said, you know, what you come into this state of realization, you're starting to discuss topics that you hadn't been in the past. So how did the people around you deal with that? And he said he wasn't so much ostracized straight away. It was almost like a pity thing. Oh, poor old Victor, he's gone off the deep end, and you know, we feel sorry for him. And it was that straight away. Like they weren't listening to him. They weren't interested in. Hang on, he used to think like us. He's obviously found some information that's taking him down a different path. No, they weren't interested in that.
I think that's fascinating. So, you know, first thought is like hats off to that guy. You know, thank you, brother, for opening your mind and being able to consider other things. Because there is the pain of excommunication from your group. I mean, this is one of the funny things, is that when it comes to the COVID narrative, the safe and effective narrative, the hydroxychloroquine thing, there are people who I've known and have trusted my judgment for decades who now think that, oh, weird, Paul has somehow gone off the rails. I mean, yeah, he kind of helped teach me math so I could get through uni. And somehow has fallen into some disinformation.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. So you've experienced it as well.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
oh yeah,
yeah.
And you know, so so I don't come to this question of epistemology and persuasion with 100% success rate, not even close. Not
so I guess this goes back to the question I asked you before, is why you went down this path. That maybe it was more of a personal reason. Okay, I've got all these friends that were close friends.
Well, I mean, that's one of those things is that, you know, I was trying to save my friends from a danger. You know, I actually had to turn it into, because I did these emails. Actually, that article that was actually originally an email to my friends to try to show them, hey guys, I think we're being lied to in the most clear possible way, and to kind of raise their skepticism to what they're hearing on the news about the hydroxychloroquine trials, or safe and effective, or and all that. And there was a series of letters, and the last one was basically, imagine, I had to put it in a funny context. Imagine aliens came and they beamed you up to their spacecraft. And, you know, after doing their probes and all that, and you're, you know, sore, and they're going to let you come down to Earth. And you're like, aren't you afraid of me, you know, kind of telling all my, because they're going to come down and they're going to probe everyone on Saturday. Right? Yeah. And they're like, you know, you can go for your life, you know. And so you go around, you tell all your friends to hide in caves. Like, you know, you're going to get laughed at. But on the other hand, you have an obligation to try to save your friends from probing. So, you know, so I spun this little tale to try to, it's like, you know, so even I basically was saying, even if you think I'm nuts, I have an obligation to try, because, you know, I know what just happened to me, and I don't want you to go through the same thing.
Yeah. This is a little bit off topic, but it reminds me of a quote or a saying. If you invent something, right, and it's a really great invention, don't ever be worried about someone stealing it, because it's going to take you decades to convince people that it's actually a good idea. Right. Even if it's the best invention in the world. So
if it doesn't fit the narrative, the narrative,
there's a process, isn't it? Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, basically, there's a fair bit of pain in discussing what I'm talking about on this podcast. To see people you care about walk into danger and to be unable to make a difference, you know, that and that's actually why this is a very burning topic for me, because I grieve that I feel like I've failed my friends.
Yeah.
And I was like, could I have said anything different? Could I have done it a different way? Could I have, and it's not that I tried. And that article that I, that we just went through was, and that wasn't my only one. It is a source of personal pain.
And that's the biggest problem, because a lot of times convincing people is baby steps.
Yeah.
And I think this is where maybe our side of things go a little bit wrong, especially when approaching politicians or the media. And Michael O'Neill of the Heart Party discussed this on a recent podcast we did with him also. And a politician was speaking to him, and he said, Michael, you do realize that when the pharmaceutical representatives come in, oftentimes they're always all well dressed. Oftentimes they're young females that were well dressed. Yeah. They give you a brochure that might be a page or two, a couple of pages long, glossy, a couple of bullet points, beautiful images, that sort of, very well produced. They bring gifts and pens and all sorts of different things. They invite you to events. They have lunches, blah blah blah. Then the next person comes in that's probably more on Michael O'Neill's side of things, and they're disheveled. They're not, they're not dressed very well. They're not wearing a tie. They've got pages and pages and pages of information. I went down to the Reckless Renewables rally on Tuesday, and I saw it. We were looking to interview Craig Kelly, and there was a lady there, and she had a stack of papers, and she put it into Craig's hand. And she was like, you need to know about this. You need to know about this. And, Craig was being very nice. He's trying to discuss things with her. And she was very dismissive. She had this attitude of, all the politicians in there, they don't care and they're not going to listen anyway. So I'm thinking to myself, well, then why are you trying? Like, why are you here? You think it's all corrupt. But her way of trying to get her, that stack that she had might have been gold. It might have been the best information ever. But the way that she was trying to deliver it to him was terrible.
Yeah. And I mean, there are a couple of different aspects of that. One is, the delivery method and how you kind of can help deliver something like that. But the other thing that strikes me is, I think there's this desire to have a favored politician be across and outspoken about every issue. And I think that's a huge mistake. So I've had a couple of politicians, that are a couple of people that I like who have been asked to speak about, let's call it, all right, let's go to the military analogy. There's a friend of mine who talked about how the military maximum, if you're strong everywhere, you're strong nowhere. If you spread yourself too thin, equally across the front lines, you can be punched through at any given point. And so, if you have a politician who is outside the establishment narrative on too many things, they lose their ability to influence anything.
Yes.
And so asking, a politician who, is open to certain, off mainstream ideas and is fighting the good fight in some place, don't ask them to fight every corner of it, because, those few people have a unique ability to persuade in Parliament on certain topics. And they have to pick and choose which are the ones. Now, hopefully they're doing it in a way that is best serves the community, but they can't be across everything, and they shouldn't try to be.
There's some very good examples. Russell Broadbent has come out and spoken out against the vaccines and be quite vocal about it. And he's just lost his pre-selection. Right. And he's been in the Parliament, or I think he's the second longest serving member of Parliament. He's been in there since the early 2000s. He's gone now. At the next election, he's out because he lost his pre-selection. So you stick your head up against the narrative and you get your head chopped off. Same with Jared Rennick. Yeah. Same things happen there. Now, some other examples. I might not mention his name, but there's a politician, state member of Parliament that's near us, and he came out in his maiden speech and said no more lockdowns. He came on our podcast and said we need a royal commission into COVID. But then he was approached by the Forest of the Fallen people to speak to them, and he didn't jump onto their thing straight away because it was all about vaccine injuries and vaccine deaths and that sort of stuff. But you got to understand, he's he's got to face pre-selection at some point. 2 out of 3 ain't bad.
Yeah,
You
I
know-
mean, so there's a number of different thoughts, and I mean, I think that my partner Stephanie's brother is vaccine injured.
Yep.
And even though we talked about the hydroxychloroquine trials, the whole science, but all the various mechanisms by which it's not credible to call the vaccine safe and effective. That's a whole set of conversations, and we've been in a number of them. So with Rennick and Senator Rennick and Broadbent, I have to say, if you're going to spend your political capital on something, that's a pretty important one, and I can't. I just have to say I'm grateful to both of them. But on the other hand, if someone tries to do it in a way that is strategic and allows them to keep their position, because sometimes history, I think, will move towards those 3 senators.
Yes.
And if they're still in the position to accelerate that, it's hard to know. It's hard to know for a leader when is the right time to lead and when is the right time to bide your time.
So
that's very tricky.
You have to cut them some slack.
I agree.
Look at the people that the Liberals have lost recently: Craig Kelly, George Christensen, Moira Deeming, Bernie Finn, Rennick, Broadbent. They've all been outspoken about something, whether it be vaccine injuries, abortion, women's rights, on trans issues. And if you do that, you do face being either expelled from the party or losing your pre-selection. You need to do it in a very measured way. And I've heard that Sophie Scamps, who's the teal up in McKellar, and you know me, I don't have much love for the teals, but when they do something good, I will support them. And I've been reading in the local papers that she's coming out trying to do something about junk food with kids, which I agree with.
Yeah.
I mean, she's a doctor, so she should know this sort of stuff. But I heard that she went down to a Forest of the Fallen recently and observed what was happening there. Now, good on her for doing that.
Yeah.
She's not going to be able to go back to the teals and her backers and say, look, I'm all on board now. It's a very, very slow process. So just because she was there doesn't mean that she's going to be agreeing with what's there. At least she had an open mind to do that. But I encourage the people that maybe got her to go there or invited her there, don't expect her to be on board straight away. It's a very slow process.
Yeah, I agree. That is a very, and I also think, one of the things, a mistake a lot of people make is to think that they can read minds. That when it comes to, well, I know this person is corrupt, or this person might be saying the right thing, but I know they're bad. So one of the things. One of the ways people fool themselves a lot is to think they understand, they can see into motivation, so I think it's important you praise the action. You can say, and also people come towards the light. If you kind of beat someone up for not getting all the way across on all the issues you care about, you drive them away.
Yeah.
And so now I can understand, someone like me who has a partner's brother who's vaccine injured. I'm never going to criticize the people who came out strong, even if they lost their career. Like I'm grateful for the heroism of the politicians who stood up. And I'll always say that, but anyone who kind of was not very upfront, or, who was critical, who takes just a few steps your way, be positive, be encouraging.
Yes.
Because otherwise you're going to be alone.
Yeah.
With what you consider the truth, and you might be surrounded by a big pile of truth, alone in your sad house.
And anything political takes a long time. I try and tell people this. I say it's a long game. You got to stick at it. And they say, "Oh, we don't have it. We don't have that time." Well, look, you probably do.
It's hard to know.
It is hard to know. I always think things are not as bad as they're going to be, and they're not as good as you think they're going to be. So you just have to keep keep chipping away, but don't think that you're going to be able to stand up and convince people straight away. It just does not work like that.
I mean, I'm all for convincing people as quickly as they can be convinced. I just got to figure out what that is.
So is there anything you want to finish up on, Paul?
I think actually, I think that's a great place to finish up. I think it was a great conversation. Thank you for inviting me. It's some issues that I'm really passionate about, and I'm all for, I hope some folks got something out of it, at least that helps them be more persuasive to the people that they're trying to help. Because I think that's what we're here trying to do.
And as I said before, I've seen you evolve your thoughts on this issue and expand on them and get better and better. So
trying.
Yeah, maybe we
That's
can.
all we can do.
Maybe we can follow up on this in a few months' time or something like that. But
if I get the secret sauce, the secret persuasion sauce, I'll bring it in.
Yes, definitely. Well, we'll have you back on different things and different issues. But everyone watching, thank you very much for watching. As I said in the beginning, if you do want to head to buy me a coffee and show us some love there. You can. Yeah, that's right. Chuck some across the pot.
Two for him.
Yeah, but head over there to buy me a coffee. If you choose, and then share this out as well. I mean, I think this is an important discussion that we had.
I think so.
I think there's some very, very interesting aspects that you've raised, which is a big reason why I've had you on today, and I love this sort of topic. So I hope everyone enjoyed it. If you did, please share it far and wide, like it, comment, whatever you need to do. It all helps with the analytics and the algorithms and all that sort of stuff. So help us grow, help us get this information out there, and thank you very, very much for watching. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.